Hello, my name is Andrea Murphy. I will be presenting on Introduction to Counseling Theories, Counseling 702 for fall of 2025 semester. As we started off learning about the psychoanalytic theory, we learned that Freud was the one who paved the way into psychotherapy. Freud's methodology was later disputed with, but his premise was that individuals' behavior was shaped in the first 6 years of an individual's life. There was a major focus on unconscious desires, and psychoanalytic theory had the goal to make unconscious motives conscious, which was cited in Corey. Clients were also seen in a non-judgmental way so that the therapist could take the blank screen approach. Often when we look at movies, this is portrayed where the client is laying on the couch and the therapist is out of sight of the client so that there is no transfer there. Freud also focused heavily on the ego, defining the ID, the ego, and the superego. I personally did not care for this theory, and it would not be one that I would really use in my practice. It has principles that are outdated and unable to be backed by scientific data, especially the unconscious desires and similar concepts. Moving on to Adler. Adler took a very different approach to psychotherapy from Freud, even though the two of them studied together. He believed that individuals were motivated by social connection rather than unconscious desires or urges. He also believed that everything a person does is geared towards a goal, which is cited in Corey. Adler was ahead of his time in that he spearheaded the way into school counseling. He gave children the benefit of the doubt, and he believed that when children misbehaved, it was because their goals have something to do with socially connecting or feelings of discouragement in the face of challenges, as cited in Corey. This theory was much more interesting to learn about than psychoanalytic, but I still found it to be a bit antiquated in today's culture. Existential theory was an interesting one in that I have had a lot of the same doubts pop into my brain from time to time, and it was a large obsession of mine with OCD. However, I was pleasantly surprised. The theory covers what it means to be human with a large emphasis on searching for our meaning in life. Something I really enjoyed about this theory was that there was discussion on how our meaning in life is constantly changing and there is no meaning that we can search for or obtain. What that basically means is to look for meaning in life is, kind of pointless because it can't, there is no just like one meaning of life. We have to create meaning in the moment, kind of a thing, is what I took from this. This theory made me think about acceptance and commitment therapy, in that we live our life by our values. Existential theory explained that the more we search for something, the harder it is to find, just like what I kind of previously said. Existential theory also focused more on the individual rather than on others' influence to our lives, like some of the other theories do. Excuse me. I have a kind of a cold, so I'm sorry for I'm sorry for clearing my throat. Person-centered therapy gets a lot of positive remarks from practicing clinicians, probably because Rogers was one of the first of his kind to challenge that the counselor knows best, as cited in Corey. This theory was a bit more challenging for me to understand initially, but once I realized it was sort of like solution focused therapy where serves as an overarching umbrella, it clicked more. At first, this theory felt very kind of frou-frou, just sort of positive, didn't seem like it had a lot of direction. But Roger believed that through positivity and empathy with clients, they could resolve their own problems without direct intervention from the therapist, as cited in Corey. Excuse me. There is also a major focus on having a trusting relationship with the client, and this is through being real with clients. There is a sense of relating through person-centered therapy that had not been touched yet in previous theories. It is certainly a theory I can appreciate, and I could see certain aspects being integrated into my practice. Gestalt therapy is centered on clients' own responsibility in their life and their ability to have self-awareness. I liked the quote by Fritz Perls as cited in the textbook. Clients have to grow up, stand on their own 2 feet, and deal with their life problems themselves. I think most people have the ability to become aware of their behavior, but it is a matter of if and when they will deal with it. Another concept I appreciated of Gestalt therapy was that there is a recognition of the present moment. A lot of suffering happens from ruminating about the past and what could or should have been. Unfinished business was expressed throughout Gestalt therapy, which focuses on different feelings that have been unexpressed and then come out in the present moment. I found this to be interesting that the theory could both recognize unexpressed feelings while focusing and putting priority on the present moment. I probably would want to learn a little bit more about Gestalt therapy in the future or see it more so in practice. Behavior therapy encompasses a variety of modalities to treat behavior in clients. From phobias to OCD to personality disorders and trauma, there are multiple types of therapy that can help a client modify behavior. Systemic desensitization was an example I found interesting because it can often be used to treat phobias. It involves progressive muscle relaxation techniques, which teach the client to be in a deeply relaxed state while approaching the anxiety hierarchy gradually, until the client can be in the most distressing situation while remaining calm, as cited in Corey. I appreciate that behavior therapy exists because previous therapies did not cover the complexity of anxiety sensitivity work. Also, in terms of personality disorders and trauma, previous talk therapies were not as helpful to clients. My experience with acceptance and commitment therapy and a bit of exposure to a dialectic behavior therapy have been helpful in that I can see when and for what types of clients these techniques would be useful. Well, let me go back for a second. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which started off as kind of rational emotive behavior therapy, it's under the umbrella of cognitive behavioral therapy. I appreciate the formula that REBT has, which entails that emotions are mainly created from our beliefs, and our beliefs influence the interpretations we make, which then fuel the reactions we have to life situations, as cited in Corey. This therapy is especially good for challenging irrational beliefs clients have, whether that be stemming from generalized anxiety disorder or depression. There are a plethora of other types of therapies which fit underneath the cognitive behavioral therapy scope, which I will further discuss. Choice theory and reality theory have similar premises, whereas they both believe that clients need to take responsibility for their actions. In choice theory, there is a heavy focus on that people have 5 genetically encoded needs that drive our lives. These are survival, love and belonging, power or inner control, freedom, and fun or enjoyment, as cited in Corey. In choice theory, there is a strong dissent of mental illness. Glasser, the originator of choice theory, more so put focus on that mental health is a result of the choices an individual makes. I did not particularly appreciate the resistance to medical interventions for mental health, or that the sole responsibility is on the individual. It feels as though there is a complete rejection for the science behind some individuals' conditions. Feminist theory is heavily rooted in social justice. The feminist theory points out that the root of female mental health issues is the gender gap. Most clients in therapy are women, and the majority of psychotherapy practitioners at the master's level are women, as cited in Corey. There is a very strong acknowledgement in feminist theory that women are the experts of their own lives. This feels very fitting for the social justice aspect in feminist theory. I can appreciate the empowerment this theory tries to incorporate for women in particular. However, it often feels like pushing an agenda on others because in reality, there is still disparities we all live with. Solution-focused therapy under the postmodern approaches was a favorite approach of mine. It is an overarching approach to therapy, which is not necessarily seen as a dogma, but rather a starting point. I like the fact that this therapy pulls from areas of strengths in clients' lives to help them solve problems they may have. Instead of focusing on the problem, there is a lot of focusing on solutions. I have witnessed this type of therapy from my own experiences in counseling, and found this to be my favorite approach that clients can take. I think that this often stops ruminating for clients and can help put the power back into their own hands. On to family systems. There is a great deal of interconnectedness in family systems therapy, which has been integrated into individual counseling, as cited in Corey. The premise of this is understanding people. Because there is so much focus on the family rather than just the individual, families can work together to solve many issues inside a family unit. This type of therapy is used in situations of crisis and reunification, as well as countless others. I can think of a handful of times in my life when family systems theory may have been helpful, particularly while my parents were raising teenagers. The four-step approach that family systems therapy uses includes joining an assessment, restructuring, valuing change, and generalization. In the initial steps, the therapist is guiding the way for the family, and towards the third and fourth step, the therapist assists in a less directive and more supportive role. As an aspiring LMFT, I was really interested in this type of therapy, and I could see how it would be very beneficial in crisis type situations or even situations where a family member is recovering from substance abuse. This would definitely be something I would use in my practice. Now on to my focused theory that I decided to choose, which we did not actually discuss in this course, but it falls under the cognitive behavioral therapy umbrella. This is called inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy, which is used to treat OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and other similar disorders. Inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy, ICBT, is a great option of treatment for individuals with disgust-based OCD, those that did not like ERP, and anyone interested in treating OCD who are interested in learning through trust in themselves rather than distress. The process behind ICBT is to teach a client that if they can recognize the process in which the obsession occurs, the cycle can be stopped before the distress or compulsion even comes into play, as cited in Ardema. The complexity of OCD is one in which many people do not fully understand. Even clinicians are still learning about it. However, ICBT has data to back its efficacy in reducing OCD to subclinical levels. In fact, Frederick Ardema, the co-founder, the co-creator of ICBT, has been bold in his claim that once the obsession has been resolved, is it even OCD anymore? ICBT serves as a beacon of hope for a lot of individuals. The, the ICBT process must be slow in its delivery. This is because there is a lot of argument in the OCD brain, and by chipping away at the foundation of OCD, the individual can learn that they do not use the same logic in other areas of their life that OCD does not touch. There is no using logic to work your way out of OCD because the obsession did not come from reality. It was constructed from imagination. At the beginning of ICBT therapy, the clinician starts by teaching subtypes of OCD and reasoning tricks such as over-reliance on hypotheticals and dismissal of inner and outer senses, to name a few. Ardema, cited in Ardema. Once the reasoning tricks of OCD have been exposed, then the client explores real self versus feared possible self. This can be a difficult area for a lot of clients to explore because feared possible self is someone they hope never to be or would fear becoming. Along with feared possible self, the client explores their real self by reflecting on their life accomplishments, daily actions, etc. This exercise empowers the client that they are exactly the opposite of what OCD says they could be. As we go on in ICBT therapy, we learn about the OCD bubble, which is a place where anything is possible because it's all in the imagination. By learning about the OCD bubble and the process in which individuals end up in the bubble, the obsession begins to crumble. The thoughts that bring individuals into the bubble are called carrier thoughts. These are what bring the reasoning tricks into reality, and they are the bridge between imagination and reality, as cited by Ardema. Something that makes ICBT unique is the conversation around functional certainty that we have in our senses. This also involves trusting what your senses are not telling you. Reality sensing is already being done by clients every day in non-obsessional ways. And we can apply this trust to our obsessions. ICBT creates a hierarchy called the ladder of ease, where clients work with the easiest and least challenging situations in which they can practice trusting reality, and then they work their way down to more challenging situations, as cited in our DEMA. Reality sensing relies on internal and external senses, and for some, one may be harder than the other, but the order of operations stays the same. At the final point in recovery and maintenance of ICBT, there is a large awareness that the more you practice and live life despite of obsessional doubts, the less power the obsessional doubts have over an individual's life. In many cases, OCD may play minimal to no role in an individual's daily life. However, due to the nature of OCD, it is not unnormal to have setbacks, and our DEMA makes it known that this is not a sign of failure. There is no unlearning what an individual already knows. For those that are living beyond OCD, there are many qualities that shift in a person once original experience, OE, is achieved. A person may not hesitate at what their senses tell them. The doubts they have may feel unimportant. There is no more monitoring for OCD. An individual is able to engage in life naturally without considering OCD, and ultimately a client can plan their future, as cited by our DEMA. ICBT has given me my life back as an experiencer of OCD. I am grateful for this therapy and would love to raise awareness of ICBT for treatment of individuals with OCD. I did a video presentation of kind of like the very condensed version of the ICBT process, but the particular example I did was of reality sensing. Hello, I am going to present an example of ICBT reality sensing. I will give a brief overview of kind of the process that happens when we are looking at inferential confusion and obsessional doubts in ICBT, and give an example of a subtype. So I have a client coming in who is having some distressing thoughts. The client then discloses that she is experiencing harm OCD about her baby. She goes into further detail that she worries about strangling her baby or dropping the baby down the stairs, and is spending a lot of hours ruminating, doesn't want to take her baby down stairways, that type of thing. Avoiding her baby, avoiding being alone with her baby, or some of her symptoms or compulsions, I should say. So the first thing that we would do in ICBT therapy is explain how thought fusion works. Thought fusion is when a person believes that a thought is a sign of something that could happen, or that the thought alone is like bad enough. There's thought fusion, there's thought action fusion, there's thought event fusion. So we would teach the client about the different types of thought fusion. And then we would look at blending, like blending in OCD or ICBT therapy is explained as when like an individual wants to, for example, succeed at a test, they would, if they were doing it from a compulsive standpoint, they would be spending like countless hours studying instead of attending to all of the other things they value in their life, like being a good mother or friend or just, person in society. And then, so those are just like some, of the beginning techniques that are applied to ICBT to uh, allow the client to kind of gain awareness of what's happening. And then As we would go on through therapy, we would look at certain reasoning tricks like dismissal of inner and outer senses and over-reliance on hypotheticals, and there's like a handful of others, but those are just some I can think off the top of my head. And then what we would do is we would, you know, ask the client to describe an obsession, and then we would have the client start to kind of identify some of the reasoning tricks that they could, see in their obsessions. And then we would also, uh, you know, dive into areas of their life that OCD has not affected and how we would not use that same logic in other places. Because OCD preys on things that individuals value, this is a very helpful technique. There is always an area that OCD does not touch in people's lives. It might be really small, such as like they might trust their, appetite, or if they're tired at night, or if they thought a joke was funny. It can be really small things in their lives. There's a lot of people with severe OCD where it touches a lot of their life, but typically there is always something that the therapist or the clinician can use as kind of like a grounding point so that they can come back and use that as like solid ground for the client. After that, the client would then learn about their feared possible self. So this is the type of person that they would hate to be. In the example of the client that was afraid of hurting their child, we'll just say that they were afraid of being a cruel person. I mean, that would be a really simple example. However, typically, the harm themes can be complicated, and I don't want to get off into the weeds too much on this, but some people are aware that they would never harm anyone, but it would be the consequence of the harm that would lead to their feared possible self. But for sake of, keeping this easy, we'll just use the example where the client was afraid of being a cruel person. And then we would take the client and have them write their real self out. So some accomplishments they have had in their lives. We would also have them just look at their daily actions, the type of person they are in a day, and we would discuss that with the client. From there, after like the reality sensing and whatnot has been discussed, or sorry, not reality sensing, real self has been discussed, then we would go on to learning about the OCD bubble and how individuals end up in the bubble. And then we would imply techniques called like the bridge exercise, which is an exercise where the client becomes aware of the language that OCD uses to pull them into the bubble, and they would then get to choose whether or not they would go further into the bubble or they would come back to reality. So for this example, I am going to do a reality sensing, role play kind of between myself and a pretend client. And we're going to just do a simple reality sensing role play. Again, we're going to go back to the client with harm OCD. We'll just call it postpartum harm OCD. And then we can walk through the steps of reality sensing. So the client comes in, she's feeling distressed about the obsession of harming her baby. There's a lot of rumination going on about why she would have thoughts like this in the first place, and she feels very guilty because she loves her baby very much. She wants to enjoy her baby. but these obsessions are just very distressing to her. And so, in reality, sensing, what we would do is we would talk about how the client basically just told us that she doesn't want her to hurt her baby, that she wants to enjoy her baby, and that in other areas she does trust that she wouldn't become a violent person. Like, the individual has coworkers and a dog, and she doesn't obsess about harming any of those people or that animal. So those are all examples of where the client is trusting real self and internal senses. And then what we would do is we would ask the client to retrace steps, what was happening before the obsession came. And in the example of like harm, was worried about strangling her baby. She was rocking her baby, singing lullabies to her baby before the harm thought came in. And this is a great way for clients to learn that they have certainty before the doubt, and that the fear is coming from a version of themselves that they would not want to be. So it's a very simple technique, but it takes a lot of practice because, as I've mentioned, the OCD brain has a lot of arguments, and there's a concept called the saboteur thoughts that keeps people very stuck. So people get ready to leave the bubble, and then the saboteur thought happens, like, but people do really hurt their babies. Yes, this is true, but it's irrelevant in in this individual's life. So it's about teaching the client that those thoughts can be there, but we can still trust our own reality. I hope that this example was helpful, and I love to teach ICBT. It's become very second nature for myself, and I am very excited to teach future clients about this.